The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, Christian, and everybody.
Let's get started with the webinar. And in terms of the agenda for today, what we'll be going through is the first of all, looking at the introduction of the app, then going through the quality standards and the regions, looking at whether it's applicable for your firm or not, the effective dates together with the objectives for ISQM, roles and responsibilities within the new standard, as well as the new risk-based approach. We'll also touch on networks and then who should have access to the system of quality management, looking at tasks and then timelines and next steps. So SQM fits into the assurance ecosystem, and it forms part of our assurance products within Caseware Africa. So the Caseware Cloud is the core of the ecosystem, facilitating all the different apps within Caseware Cloud, and it allows us to then incorporate information across the ecosystem. For more than 3 decades, Caseware has been providing auditors and accountants around the globe with flexible tools and platforms to help them work smarter, achieve client goals, and keep up with the relentless change. At Caseware, we recognize the value when we saw the new update within the standards, and we recognize the value of technology as an essential element of the proactive quality management approach envisioned by the new suite of quality standards, in making quality management easier, clearer, and more intuitive for all levels in the professional accounting practices. The traditional manual documentation facilitated in the documentation of policies and procedures, but it lacked an integrated workflow with staff and engagement workflows. So our brand new reimagined SQM Quality app combines the functionalities from our existing suite of applications with new capabilities to provide firms with a cloud-based quality management application that is accessible from anywhere and scalable to any firm, small and large, that makes compliance easy. Our vision is to provide not only compliance, but an experience that delights users in their quality workflow. By assisting with facets in managing accounting practices, SQM Quality will embed itself for all staff as a pro that facilitates an iterative system of quality management. Incorporating the Caseware ecosystem in SQM Quality, we aim to provide firms with a solution that is integrated in their daily tasks and collate relevant in monitoring and evaluation of the SoQM effortlessly and user-friendly. Look at our content. We bring together compliant content with uniquely designed features that create a system that fits the modern world. Our content is designed and approved by a group of experts in the field of quality management and assurance engagements. Our content comes with a built-in risk assessment procedures, allowing you to assess the probability of a risk occurring and the effect of the risk on the business should it occur. Our libraries of content for objectives, risks, and responses provide firms with premium content curated by our experts that allows firms to design a comprehensive system of quality management. We are currently looking at supporting 13 main regions through our distributor network in 9 different languages. In our discussions with network firms, we really saw a need for networks to design a system of quality management for the network that can filter down and report back up into the network. We believe that having the content available in various regions and in applicable languages will allow a network to facilitate this. Also important to note, we've included the 2 base international standards, both in American English and in British English. So if your country or region is not listed, but you have implemented the international standards, those regions can also use the 2 international standards already included in the various languages for them. So Q&A, when is the new standard applicable to the firm, and to which firms will it be applicable to?
So ISQM 1 is applicable to or must be complied with by any and all firms that perform, I guess the obvious is the audits, but then also independent reviews in terms of the ISRE standards, which includes your interim independent reviews, any other assurance engagements, such as perhaps assurance on the audits or reviews any other assurance engagements that are not your traditional audits or reviews on historical information, perhaps a trust account audit, prospective information. Even in some cases, we might even start thinking about the ESG type of assurance engagements. If your firm performs any of comply with ISQM 1. And then probably the two parts that are often forgotten are the related services, and specifically there then your agreed upon procedures and your compilation engagements. So a firm that only performs, let's say, tax compliance engagements won't need to comply with ISQM 1, but I believe that there are many more firms that have to comply with ISQM 1 that may not have necessarily realized that before.
Thank you. And if we then look at the effective dates.
So the standard ISQM 1 is applicable from 15 December 2022. Now, what's important to remember here is that there are certain things that need to have happened by 15 December already, and then there are certain things that need to or can only start happening from the 15th of December. So what we have to do by the 15th of December is that every firm has to establish quality objectives. You have to identify and assess quality risks, design and implement responses to address those risks, and design and implement monitoring activities. So all of that already has to be in place come 15 December. The practical operation thereof then takes place at the very latest from the 15th of December, where all your responses and your monitoring activities will then be commencing. And within 1 year from the 15th of December, the firm then has to perform an evaluation of their system of quality management to determine whether this system is achieving the objective of ISQM 1. So certainly a lot of work that still needs to be done between today and the 15th of December, although a big thing really will happen from the 15th of December. So the objective for ISQM 1, I think that is probably one of the most important parts to remember. This does not only affect my individual engagements. So the standard was designed or redesigned to say that the firm has to design, implement and operate not just a manual, but a system of quality management for the engagements that the firms perform that will then provide reasonable assurance that both at a firm level, the firm and all of the staff fulfill their responsibilities in terms of the relevant standards and requirements, so auditing standards, code of conduct, etc. And then, because as a firm we are complying with all of this, the engagement reports that are the result of all of our engagements are also appropriate when issued. So this is really ultimately what we get to as we go through this whole system of quality management, designing and identifying risks, everything, we always come back to this objective to say, are we achieving this objective, designing, implementing, operating the system? Right, now the next thing is that the standard has elevated the responsibility and the accountability for the leadership of a firm. And so the standard now prescribes specific roles that need to be allocated to individuals. So the first one is a person or perhaps persons need to take the ultimate responsibility and accountability of the system of quality management. And what is that? And well, that's really to say the firm has to take, or this person has to take ultimate responsibility and accountability for achieving the objective that we just looked at. So this is traditionally perhaps your CEO or perhaps a managing board of partners or some person or persons equivalent to that role. This person has the ultimate responsibility. The buck stops with this person for complying with ISQM 1, for ensuring the objectives are achieved, and of course then also the evaluation that we mentioned earlier on. As part of your ensuring that the objective is achieved, this is also the user or users who will have to ultimately perform the evaluation at least within 1 year and thereafter at least every year to see, are we achieving the objectives or objective of ISQM 1. So that's your first new role. The second role that the standard prescribes is the operational responsibility. Standard obviously recognizes that the CEO cannot be doing the day-to-day operational responsibilities as well. So this will be a person, perhaps more than one, but probably a technical partner, someone like that, who has then the accountability to design, implement, and operate the firm's system of quality management. This will be the person that's going to drive the identification of risks and the design of the response, etc. Not necessarily the person doing all of the work, but who has ultimate responsibility and accountability for the operational part of the system. Then the standard goes a little bit further and says, well, this operational responsibility is quite extensive. So if a firm wants to, you can always allocate certain parts of or certain aspects of the system of quality management to other individuals, and there the standard then gives examples of perhaps an individual with monitoring and remediation responsibility, or perhaps a person with a responsibility for compliance with the ethical requirements. So those are a few of the examples that can be added to, but the core ones, ultimate responsibility and operational responsibility.
So let's go ahead on and look at how SQM is dealing with responsibilities and different roles within the app itself. So we'll have a look at how do we give access to the app, the user roles, assigning roles to groups, responsibility, and setup. So if I jump right into SQM and I've opened it in Caseware Cloud, and I can see immediately a message if I open SQM that the page is restricted for SQM only users, and please contact your Caseware Cloud administrator for access. So we recognize that different people within the firm will have different requirements to access. Not everyone will be involved in designing the manual, not everyone will be involved or will have access to the app necessarily within the firm. So initially when you start out with SQM, the notification will look like that. If we then go into staff and we search for a staff member we want to provide access to, so I'm going to search for an SQM user, and I will click on edit for that specific user. Then if I go to apps and I navigate through to SQM, I can first of all provide that user with access to the app. Once they have access to the app, I can also allocate an advanced role for that specific user. So are they going to be involved in designing the system of quality management? Are they going to be involved in operating the system of quality management? And do they need access to the overview? So for the ultimate and operationally responsible parties, that will be both in design and overview. For the general staff, they will be involved in operating. So they'll have to go and see the system of quality management, and they also need to execute and perform tasks within the system. So for this user, I will provide them with operate access. So once the app is then enabled on your cloud instance, you need your firm admin to go and allocate the relevant roles that you will be performing in the app before you then get access to SQM. So once we now have access, I myself have all the access that I need, because I will be involved in designing, operating, and I'll be looking at the overview a bit later once that's released. So within design, you can see it was structured as such. So I've got design access, and therefore I can see the design tabs. If you don't have design access, you won't see this menu item and you will only see operate. Okay, so let's start with in designing the system of quality management. So we've now initially allocated the roles that people will be performing, but in terms of the standard, there's also certain responsibilities that has to be accepted for the system of quality management. So I've allocated 3 people to the system of quality management in terms of responsibilities. We have UNA, who is operationally responsible, and we have myself as ultimately responsible. We have also broken down 2 additional responsibilities if that is applicable to your firm, if someone else is in charge of monitoring and remediation, and independence. So you don't always will have to use it. In smaller firms, it might be the same person that is ultimately or operationally responsible for both of those roles as well. And you can then choose whether you select all or just the ones that's applicable. In bigger firms and larger networks, those might be applicable. Once you've assigned the person to a certain role, they need to come into the app and actually accept that responsibility. So once you accept the responsibility, I'm just going to remove myself. There is an agreement that you make in terms of the standard to say, I am accepting the role of ultimately responsible, and here are my responsibilities that I am accepting. And for the operationally responsible, there will be different responsibilities that you would then accept. You can add more users if you want to, and they can go in and accept their roles. I can then also, if as ultimate responsible party, go and review the items already accepted and the roles already accepted as such. Should you need, and if it's a principal within your firm, you can also link it to an appointment letter if you do complete appointment letters. So that is how do we set up initially the SQM app and allocate responsibilities and make that available to the users. So after we've accepted the responsibilities, you know, what is next in the process?
So next, the standard requires us to have a risk assessment process. Now, what is actually exciting about this is that no longer does every firm have almost like a shopping list of all the procedures that you just have to have in your system or in your quality control manual. These are all the policies and procedures, and we just have to comply with all of them. No, you will follow a risk-based approach. And so that obviously requires then, very similar to how we would normally do in an audit or in servicing a client, to first understand what we are dealing with. What do we have here? And so the standard requires the firm to first understand itself. What clients do you have? How many staff do you have, etc., things like that. Understand the firm itself, understand the engagement the firm enters into. And then based on that understanding, using that understanding, the firm is then in a position to establish quality objectives. Now, just note that the standard has prescribed some quality control objectives, which we refer to as mandatory objectives, but the firm can also identify additional ones. Next, for each of those quality objectives, the firm will then, using the understanding, identify conditions, events, circumstances, or anything that will indicate a possibility that those objectives will not be achieved. We refer to them as risks. All right? You'll identify those risks, you will assess them. The standard prescribes that you have to assess them in terms of the probability that they will actually happen, the chance that they'll happen, as well as the effect that that could possibly have on achieving the objectives. Assess those risks, and if you then assess them as a quality risk, in other words, they need a response, you will then go and design responses, which could be policies and or procedures, and you will implement those responses. Now, the risk assessment process then continues to say, then the firm has to evaluate whether the system of quality management is, let's say, operating effectively. Remember, we said earlier on, we have to evaluate whether the system is achieving the objective of the standard that we referred to earlier on. And the firm has to, or the ultimate responsibility person, has to conclude whether the system is operating as it should and whether the firm's system is achieving that objective from ISQM 1. So this risk-based approach or risk assessment is really what drives the design and the operation of the firm's system of quality management. Now, Christian, let's see what this looks like in the app itself then.
Okay, so what we'll look at now is how do we go ahead and design the system of quality management, and also understanding the firm's risk assessment process. So if we jump back into SQM, as part of the setup, you also need to choose the applicable standards. So which applicable which standard will be applicable for me as a firm? If you have a network, it might be multiple standards. If you are a sole practitioner or a smaller firm just based in one country or one region, you would then select the region applicable to you. Also, the network might be in all of the applicable regions, but one firm within the network might be only in one. So we give you the option to choose where you are. So for this demo, we will choose the ISQM South Africa version, and I will go ahead and sign off as prepared on the applicable standard. This will then tailor my content to be applicable on the South African version as adopted and amended for the region. In terms of the risk assessment, you and I mentioned that you need to assess the probability and the effect of a risk happening, and we have given you the 5 scales going from rare to very likely, insignificant to catastrophic, and you can go and tailor how you want the quality risks to be scored based on probability and effect. Once the risk is scored, there's also a risk threshold, and you would then go and allocate the risk threshold actions or responses based on those items that you then need to go and action. So is it a quality risk, and what do we need to do after that? Once we have done that, we will go into understanding. So in this section, the firm must then document their understanding of the nature and circumstances of the firm, and we've given you that guidance already. And it is to assist you in identifying your conditions, events, and circumstances, together with actions or inactions that may affect the achievement of the quality objectives. So we've given you the guidance to go and complete and understand your firm as a whole. So if we look at, for example, your client portfolio risks, you can then go and collate, first of all the information that is needed. And once it is collated, you would go ahead and then look at your specific clients and document the information there. So there we can go and say what type of entities are the firm's clients, and we can say it's a company. We can go ahead and which industries, let's say we deal a lot with mining, and we'll go ahead and complete. There we maybe have JSE listings, and this will give us an idea of what's going on within our firm, what is the objective, what is the actual risks that something could happen within the firm. Once we've then completed the understanding, we've signed off the procedures we've performed, we can go ahead and we can move into actually completing the objectives. So when I open the objectives, you will see that we already have the content included for you in there. And the content is included based on the standard that you've selected, and it is all the mandatory risks already included for you. So we start with all the mandatory risks, the mandatory objectives. We also have some items in the libraries, and we'll go through and explain that in a bit more detail. So let's start with a specific risk. So I'm going to deal with the ethical requirements. So you can use any of the search functionality. I already know the ID that I'm looking for. So I'm going to look at the relevant ethical requirements where the objective says the firm and its personnel fulfill their responsibilities in relation to the relevant ethical requirements to which the firm and firm's engagements are subject. So if I go ahead and open the information, I can see, yes, I've marked it as relevant, it's mandatory, and it is relevant for the standard. So I'll go ahead and edit this specific objectives. So You'll remember that I said in terms of the standard, there's some mandatory items already. So this is a mandatory risk, a mandatory objective. You can't make any changes to the mandatory items documented. I can also indicate if it's not relevant. So let's say you're a sole practitioner, you don't have any staff, it might not be relevant to you. You can then answer no and provide a reason on why that is not relevant for the firm. We're going to go ahead and say, yes, it is actually relevant. There's the objective. You can provide additional descriptions. And we're going to link this specific objective to the risk of, first of all, non-compliance, but I'll also go through the process of linking it to the gift registers because the objective has many facets to it, and it could have different risks and policies. There's also effective dates from and to. If you want the item to be relevant from a specific date to a specific date, whether it's an objective, a risk, or a response, you can indicate as such. If you leave that blank, we will assume that it is relevant from the date selected. Okay, so we don't already have to link it to the risk or the responses because we know the process is iterative and you'll go around and looking at risks, then linking it back. But what I'll do is I'll sign off this specific objective as being prepared. So this will then take the objective and we can move ahead into then recording a risk and linking the risk to this objective. So I'm going to go ahead and add the risk. So I want to link it to the objective we just recorded. And we can already see that the objectives are listed for us. So all of the objectives that are relevant will be listed for you, and we can go ahead and select that. There's a library of risks already included. I will click on the library, and what I will do is I will search for my gift and inducements risk. So our content team came up with the risk library already, and those are the ones that we find are most common or think will be most common, and we've included the risk for you. So there we can see the risk, and we've already proposed some objectives or responses applicable for you. I'm going to go ahead and select the risk. So once I select the risk, it will insert the risk for me, and I can go ahead and change the risk if I wanted to, because we're putting it in from the library, but you can customize this to be relevant to your firm. And not only can, you actually should customize it so that it is relevant to your firm. You can add an additional description, and then we need to go and start the risk assessment. So what is the probability of it occurring? I'm going to say it is likely. And then what is the risk assessment, the effect? I will go ahead and say it's moderate. So you can see that the result then says medium, and that's based on the selection in the risk setup that we've done before. And the response required is a moderate response. So we know it is a quality objective. So now we need to provide a reason for the risk rating. And I'm going to say I didn't mark it as catastrophic or very likely because staff do receive training, and you can give a reason for, they know that they shouldn't be receiving gifts. If they do receive gifts, they need to disclose the gifts and in terms of ethical requirements, what they need to do. So we don't think it will have such a big effect. You can then document that. There's an option for you to add a note. If you're ready, you can already link it to the procedures and the policy responses together with the effective date if relevant for your firm. I'm going to go ahead and save that specific risk. Now remember, we also need to go and then sign off on the risk. So there we can see the risk right at the top, ready, waiting for us to then sign off the risk and actually say that we are approving the risk. Now, after we've allocated the risk to the procedure or linked it to, then we need to go into our policy response. So I'm going to go ahead and link that risk to a policy response. So there we can see the risks that we have available, and I'm going to select the inducements, including gifts. That's the risk we just raised, and I will link the policy to that specific risk. Then I'll go into the library and just have a look whether the team haven't already included a policy for gifts. So there we see policy 88. The team already included a policy for dealing with risk. So there we can say the firm applies the conceptual framework to identify and assess any potential threats to compliance when inducements are offered by or to clients or other persons. So I'm going to say that policy definitely sounds like it will work for me as a firm. Again, I can go and change the policy to make it applicable to the firm even more and add any additional descriptions. Any notes, I can then link it to a procedure if I'm ready to do it at this point, or you can go ahead and save that specific policy. So if I open the policies, we can see we have already recorded a few policies in here, and I'm going to go ahead and again sign off on policy number 88 and say that I am happy with this policy and mark it as prepared. And you can see as we go along, different people will be in the design process. You can see who signed off on certain policies, risks, objectives, and the date on which those items were signed off. So we've gone ahead for this specific objective around ethics. We've done the objectives. We've allocated a risk to that objective. We've allocated a policy response. And now we can go into actually allocating a procedure. So what has to happen and how we are going to address it. So there's my procedure. I am going to go and select my policy number 88, the inducements or gifts, and see in the library again whether there are any linked items and tasks available for me on gifts. Case was already done for me. So there we can see there's already a procedure available. I'm going to select that procedure and then have a read through the procedure. So there we can see when an inducement is offered by or to a client or another person, the engagement partner or personnel involved in this offering applies the guidance in section 250 of the SICA code or 340 in terms of the URBA code. So content is also tailored for the specific regions. You can then also go and add to the policy response, add any additional descriptions, and you can also add any links. So if you wanted to link it to any external documentation that you either have on the cloud or somewhere else, you can incorporate those links. You can also link it to a specific task, and then this is now where this procedure gets very important on how do we set the procedure up. So first of all, we have timing, and we have two options. It could either be ongoing or periodic. If we select ongoing, it is a manually executed task, so it means it can happen at any point in time. The firm can receive, or the staff within the firm can receive a gift at any point in time within their engagements, and that task will then be available for anyone to complete at any point in time manually. If we had to select periodic, so if we take the same policy with different procedures, you might say that as and when a gift is received, the staff should go and disclose those gifts. But as the operationally responsible partner or an engagement partner, those gift registers has to be reviewed on a, let's say, monthly basis. Then I will say it is actually a periodic task. So it needs to happen at a specific point in time, and we want the SQM to kick off a task for us and remind users to go and execute on those tasks. So there we can then go and say, who is it responsible to? I'll run through one example, the leadership, and we can then edit the frequency. So we can either say that this task needs to be executed daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. I'll select monthly, and then we have an option to say, must it happen on the first day of every month? At what time? Let's not give people work at 5, let's rather give them work at 8. And then during the nearest weekday. So if the first is on a Sunday, it will actually kick off on that Monday. Or you can go and do, if you want it to be on the first or last Monday or Friday, and then when does it need to start. So you can then set that frequency, and when that actually periodic frequency occurs, what is going to happen is SQM will kick off the task for you, and that task will prompt an email, and when that task is then opened, that person that it was allocated to or group of people will then get a reminder to go and complete that specific task. I'm going to go back and say this is actually not for the leadership, but it is an ongoing task for all the firm personnel. And it is for everyone in the firm, and I can assign it either to specific people. So if I wanted to assign it to one person, I could do that, or I can actually assign it to the group. So I will say, let's assign it to all staff. So all the staff will now have access to this specific procedure, and then we will link the procedure to a specific task. I'll go ahead and save the specific procedure, and then I will also go and sign off. If I go to my procedure response and say that I am happy with procedure 189, you can also search for the procedure and say I'm happy that that specific procedure is then signed off. So if we then look at tasks, I will go ahead and add a new task. So the procedure is 189ZA, and the task is, let's see if there's a task already available for me. So there's our task 2. Let's read the task. It's a form to be completed by each staff member when receiving or offering gifts or other inducements. So I'm going to select that specific tasks. And when we look at the tasks, there's the instruction of the task and what the task is about. And I can go into my form editor to see what will the task look like when the task is actually sent. So we can see there we ask who received the gift, the name of the client, whether it was offered by or to the client, so that you get something or did you gift something, what was the description, and then could it influence your behavior, was any gift or other inducement accepted, and all of this information will then be included in the task when the task is then sent out. You also have the option to at any point in time edit the task. So this is a form builder and it can be changed. So I can take a text field, I can drag in a text field, and I can change that. If I want selection boxes, I can go ahead and add selection boxes and you can change that. If you want them to document their name and surname in different fields, you can also go in and edit the tasks at any point in time and change the guidance, how it looks like, where it's aligned, and how big you want it to be. So these tasks are fully customizable. We've included a few that's most commonly used for you already within SQM. Okay, so I'll go ahead and then save this specific task, and I will also find it as being prepared. So you saw that we could go through the process. We could link one item to multiple items. You can go back and forth between the steps because we know, as I said, it is an iterative process, and you can then go from the objectives, allocate risks to it, allocate the specific policies to those, and then look at how are you going to respond within the procedures, and which tasks do you want to have then executed on those procedures.
Thanks, Christian. That's insightful. So what is important, though, is that the content that is provided in the libraries, of course, are there to help you. So it is not compulsory for you to use them. But it is important that you realize the new topics that are covered in the ISQM1 standard. So first of all, the standard refers to and even has objectives that refers to external service providers. So those could be perhaps an external IT service provider, external EQR, monitoring person, or even software or basically anything else that you use in your firm to help you to achieve quality. And so there's objectives, and we've also included potential risks, responses, etc., for you to ensure that you cover these new topics, the new requirements, if you want, in the SQM app as well. A similar one with regards to technology. So, for example, there are suggestions in the standard that technology or a new IT tool or template working paper shouldn't be used until it has been approved by the firm, because you have to consider whether it will help you to achieve the quality objectives or whether there are any risks involved there. So there needs to be a consideration of the technology as well, and there's then risks and responses for those. And the standard also includes actually a whole new element on information and communication. So again, there are objectives, risks, etc., to address the objective of the continual flow of information and appropriate communication, both internally but also externally. Let's say, for example, with a regulator, or perhaps information that needs to be communicated to clients, or how it should be communicated to clients. So all of those new topics that are addressed in the standard have been included in the libraries of content for the SQM app. Next, another thing to consider is where your firm is part of a network, either where you belong to a network or whether you make certain use of the services from a network. So not all networks have services, let's say, for example, a monitoring service or providing technology or methodology or something like that. But the mere fact that you belong to a network could mean that the network, either globally or locally in your country, could prescribe or identify specific objectives or perhaps specific risks, and of course perhaps required responses to those that a network firm has to comply with. So first of all, the standard says don't just accept those things blindly. You have to also assess whether they are appropriate for your firm. And then, of course, we need to import them. We need to get them into our SQM app. So Christian, show us where and how we can actually accommodate these requirements with regards to networks in the SQM app, please.
Okay, so a need we identified for networks was that a network will have the international office, which will have to comply with many different regions and standards within those regions. But we didn't want every firm then in those regions to go and set up the same standard and do a copy and paste exercise from the network into the actual firm's system of quality management. So we've brought in a new concept around settings where you can import those items. So if I go back into SQM, and this is not something that will happen often, but if I go into settings and I navigate to SQM, you will see that we have an import button. So in the import button, the networks can then, when they receive their system of quality management from their international office, go and import the different items from that network. We've also allowed the export or a creation of an Excel. So if you already have a system of quality management or you have your objectives and risks documented in Excel or somewhere else, for you to export and get our template on how to import, you can go and download this template, transpose your information onto that template, and then bring in the information with an import, and that will already import your objectives, risks, policy, procedures, and tasks. What you could also do is, if you don't want to do an import every single time, but maybe just 1 or 2 items was added, you can go into the network objectives and you can go ahead and add those specific network objectives. So it won't have all the information that we've previously saw from the objectives screen, because each firm then has to go and do their assessment separately. So you will import the base of the objective, so the title and ID, which components, what is the objective, and then which standard it relates to. After you've then imported or inserted them as part of the network objectives, those items will be displayed within SQM as part of your network objectives. So when we previously looked at the objectives, we saw the mandatory objectives, and then what you will see is the new ones will be listed as network objectives, and they will work similar to the mandatory objectives. If you then also add your own objective, those will be listed as firm objectives. So we've made provision for 3 types of objectives: your mandatory objectives, your network objectives that comes from the international office that you import, or if you just import your own objectives, they will be listed there, or firm specific objectives. So that's how we've accommodated for the networks and for firms who want to have then access a manual across various firms. So you and I, when we look at the standard and how we've designed SQM, who should have access to the system of quality management?
Christian, this is a very, very difficult question to answer, not because of the answer itself, but because a lot of people don't like hearing this. But let's consider. So from my perspective, all staff. And if you've got external service providers, whether that is your EQR, whether it is your IT service provider, or even an independent monitoring person, they should all have access to your system of quality management. Your HR staff needs access. Your other services, let's say your tax compliance department, they need to see who are your prohibited investment entities. They need to see which entities have statutory audits where you need specific independence requirements, and where they should make very, very sure that they are not delivering related or other services that will then actually detriment your independence and cause the firm to no longer be able to be the auditor. So it really is important that absolutely every person should have access to your system of quality management. Yeah, so that obviously impacts on the number of licenses that you need on cloud, but it really is important not just to see the policies, but also in the case of your HR, for example, or I've mentioned IT, all of those users also need to perform certain procedures, tasks in the system of quality management, and therefore need to be able to operate and actually record those tasks within the system.
Okay, so let's look at how the system looks like and what do we do after we've now designed our system of quality management. So the first step in the process is to, after we've designed all of our objectives, we've linked them to the risks and the policies, we will get to the review and publish area. So in review and publish, we'll show you what your draft system of quality management will look like. There is 3 objectives that we have already signed off and prepared. And you can then drill down within those items to see whether they are linked to a risk. So let's run through the one that we did before, the ethical requirements, detection of personnel non-compliance. The annual declaration is linked to it, but also the inducements of gifts with the policy and the procedure linked to it. So there we can see objective, risk, policy, procedure, and there's again the objective, risk, policy, procedure. We do have one mandatory objective where it is actually only linked to a policy but not a procedure. We will give you a warning to say that maybe you need to go and investigate this. It's not a requirement that every objective does need a procedure, but go and have a look at it and see whether it is needed. if an item, for example, objective was not linked to a risk, you would then also get a stop button or a you can't go ahead button with an error to say you actually can't go ahead and publish the system of quality management because it doesn't fulfill the requirements of the standard and you need to still link it to either a risk or a policy. So as the ultimate responsible party, you can then go through. I can see when it was last published. So I can see you and I published it yesterday on the 18th of August. We made a few changes today. I'm going to go ahead and approve those changes. And after I've approved it, I will go ahead and publish. You can see next to publish is also export. So we spoke about the exports a bit earlier for especially networks. So there it could be exported and then published or imported. So I'm going to go ahead and publish. Do I want to publish the version? Yes, I will go ahead and publish. So there we can see it has been published. So now we move over into what the other staff in the company or firm will see. So first of all, we start out with the system of quality management. They can see the objectives, the risks, the policy, and the procedures. Again, they can't see all the items within the risk as an example. We're not showing them our risk assessment linked to that specific item. That's maybe not information that's relevant to them. It's more relevant to the firm and the ultimate responsible parties. But the staff can see what is the objectives, what is the risks, and then what is the policy and the procedure. So there they can go ahead. Ethical requirements, there is the gifts and the non-compliance, and there we have our annual declarations together with the risk, the gift register linked to that specific mandatory objectives. So there we can go ahead through, they can have a read through and get an understanding. In terms of responsibilities, we also give them everyone that is responsible and what are they responsible for, so that they have an idea of what's going on in the firm and if they need to report to someone or just who is responsible for quality in the firm.
Christian, so we see the system now, but how do my staff now execute procedures? How would I know that they are doing what they should be doing?
Okay, so that's where we've included tasks. So I previously showed you within tasks. So within tasks, when you then have the task available, at any point in time, whether it's then an automated task that is scheduled or whether it's an ongoing task, they will have the opportunity to go ahead and open the task and record that specific task. So let's go back into SQM and have a look at tasks from the user's perspective. So if I open my tasks, first of all, I already have my annual ethics declaration available for me. So that could have been a task that was kicked off at a specific point in time. It's waiting and it's ready, available for me to start working on. Now, what I just want to point out, this functionality is not yet automating the tasks for the users. We understand that everyone will be in the design mode and still designing the items for the different for the system of quality management. Within the next week or two, the automation will then be enabled for firms to go and automate those frequencies that we spoke and saw a little bit earlier, so that they can go ahead and make or schedule those tasks once the system is actually published for the firm and the staff will start working on it. But when you're designing it, you can already design your task with the frequencies in mind and the automation in there. So let's go ahead and assume I've received a gift. So my gift task, I can manually go and trigger the task from the plus button, and I can say, yes, I have received a gift. So I will say my gift and record the gift. So there, I'll go ahead and create a task for the gift that I've received. You will see that it goes ahead and it creates a task for me within Cloud, and I can already see the task available for me. It will mark it in terms of the workflows being available, and that form we designed earlier and linked to the actual policy and procedure will now be available for me to go ahead and complete. So there I can document the task and I can say and go through the process and actually complete the task. And then once everything is completed, I can click on submit. To show you an example of the annual ethics declaration, you can also see they can jump into that task and then be able to see what that specific task, and the task will then have different questions that they need to go through. So jumping back to SQM, I as a user being in Operate can only see the tasks that either I have created or the ones that was assigned to me. So when we allocated those policy procedures, we allocated either to a group, which was all staff, or you can allocate it to certain people. And those people will then be able to add the task relevant to them, or they will see the automated tasks already available for them. Now, the ultimate responsible parties might want to see all the tasks available to them and the ones that was triggered and then not yet executed. So my status are still in progress. So as an ultimate responsible party or operational responsible party, you ultimately want to see all the annual declarations that were sent out together with the ones that was then not received back. So the ones that are still in progress and not yet completed. And that is what the Operate Overview tab is for. So within the next few weeks, we'll be completing the Operate Overview tab for you. So you'll see that it is coming soon. But as those tasks then get published and automated, the ultimate responsible parties will be able to go into Operate Overview and see all of the tasks. They will then have different filters to filter on the ones that's available. Are they in progress? Have they been completed? And you can then also create follow tasks or have a discussion with someone on that specific item to say, why haven't you yet completed the independence declaration, or we urgently need it to be completed. Okay, so that is then the process of having a task and how you would work with and operate within the different staff levels. Okay, so before we move on, let's look at a few of the questions. I see there is quite a few questions. So if you do have any question that we haven't yet addressed, or that you want to find out a bit more around the app, please put it in the questions box and we will answer those questions for you as they come up. So I think a question coming up quite a bit is if the session is recorded and if we will have access to the recording. So definitely the session is being recorded. You will have access, you'll be able to log in and view the webinar at your own convenience, or if you want to share it with someone, you can do that as well. Someone say they've received SQM quality. How do they install, and do they know that we have to install the add-on? Okay, so for SQM, there is no installation. So remember, it is a cloud app, and the cloud app will be enabled from our side on your cloud instance. Once it's enabled on your cloud instance, you would then enable the cloud app through the cloud security settings per user and allocate the roles and responsibilities to those specific users. They then have ability to go and see the app. So going forward, there will be no installs for SQM. So as we're updating the product, we will update those in your cloud environments. You don't have to ever worry about an installation again for SQM. And we will automatically update the app for you without touching your content. So we will be very aware of not making any changes to your system of quality, and we will only be updating our libraries. But if you've already used content from the library, you would be able to use the new library content, but we will not be making changes to the content that you've added on your own. And new features and availability of features will come in. You'll be notified through the What's New dialog when you open Cloud once there's been an update. Then we get a question, is SQM only available on Caseware Cloud? And as the firm has not yet moved to Caseware Cloud. So I think this is an opportune time to then look at moving to Caseware Cloud, also making use of the hybrid capabilities within SmartSync and the desktop. SQM is only available on cloud. In future, we want to make use of the latest and greatest technology that we have available, as we need everyone in the firm, your name mentioned it, to have access to SQM and have all the information collated for you in one place. That's why we've actually included it in cloud for you, and it will form part of the cloud ecosystem. So information will in a future date then also feed into SQM, and you'll be able to set up policies and procedures around information around engagement files and integrate it together with working papers, which is a technology that wouldn't be available if we did not go with cloud. So if you have not yet implemented cloud, then I think it is an opportune time to look at the implementation of cloud. Then we have a question around sole proprietors have to adhere to this as well. How would we go about this? It seems extremely daunting. So definitely it could be a daunting process. I think we've tried to make it as easy as possible with including all the content already for you within the libraries. Not all the objectives would be applicable to every sole practitioner or provider. And it is also, the initial setup will take a bit of time. So that's why we are releasing it already to everyone, so that you can start thinking about the design of your system of quality management already, and then be in time for having the system implemented by the 15th of December. I don't know, you and I, do you maybe want to add on that specific point?
Yes, yeah. So I think part of that is over and above the libraries themselves. Remember, things like these task forms is where I think you can really save a lot of time by using the predetermined risks, and even these forms should save you a lot of time. From my perspective, it really is a matter of start with something, perhaps start with one of the components, the leadership component or the ethics component, and just start by looking at the objectives that are relevant to that component. Start identifying the risks, work through the library. And I find that, I really believe that for especially a small, I almost want to use the word simple firm, a firm that doesn't have a lot of complications in terms of staff set up in different offices, those things, I think you will probably find the majority of your risks as well as the necessary responses to those already in the system. So it will be a matter of working through the content, but I do believe that there won't be a lot of designing your own content necessarily.
Thank you. Okay, so then if we look at some of the other questions, in Lesotho and Eswatini, do we have to purchase the international version or the South African version? So the South African version has been tailored for the SAICA and URBA requirements. So those would not be relevant in Lesotho or Eswatini. So I would recommend using the international version, and then also get in touch if there are any specific requirements for those regions, then those could be added. And as a firm, remember, you can also add your own objectives that is relevant for the requirements applicable to you. Then when we allocate the assigned groups to staff to complete a task form, is it only available for the users for whom we've bought licenses on SQM, or do other users of our SmartSync also have access to only complete tasks? So only users with a cloud license and an SQM license would be able to, first of all, open cloud, and secondly, open SQM. So if you already have working papers users will not have access to cloud except if they are Caseware online with a new bundle. So if you do have the bundle, and we've also bundled the products together so that it is easier to purchase the hybrid option together with SQM, then everyone will have access to SQM. So please note that Caseware only desktop users will not have access to SQM on its own, because they do need a cloud license and they also need a license to SQM. In setting up and you have so many clients in different industries, do you have to mention all of them in the questionnaire? So I take that back to the understanding. So the understanding helps you to obtain information about your firm and to actually see what is going on within the firm, and for you to collate that information. I would say as a best practice to go and complete that understanding as completely as possible, and document those, because those might prompt you to see where there could be a risk, or there could be a risk or an objective that you maybe don't meet. Also remember, you don't have to complete the every single question. You can also attach. So if you already have a client list with the industries documented, or you have some of the information somewhere else, you can just go and attach that information so that it's readily available, and to show that you have considered that in terms of the process. Then a question around, are we going to complete this form for each client and for every audit assignment annually? So I'm taking that back either to the gift register or to the independents. So the gift one, you will only complete when you receive a gift. So it's only when a gift is received. You don't have to receive one to say you have not received a gift. You only do it when you actually receive a gift. And then for the independence declaration, it is for the overall independence declaration. In the audit solutions, there's also declarations for that specific engagement. So you would then go and complete the one for the actual engagement within the engagement, but the one overall you would only complete on a frequency that you as the firm would then set up in terms of the policy. But you wouldn't have to go and complete it for every single audit. You might, if you want to assign a specific maybe a client acceptance policy or procedure, or there could be some other policies and procedures that you assign for every engagement, then it would be for every engagement, but it doesn't have to be set up in that way. Okay, so there the next question is the app and add-on, and is it compulsory, or can the company have their own system? So I think in terms of the standard, most of the professional firms does require a system of quality management, and we've built SQM to assist you within that process. In the future, as I've mentioned, we're also going to incorporate some of the other integrations. So we believe it is going to be the easiest way to implement the system of quality management, to facilitate the compliance within the process, and also to make sure that it is an easy process and it's not an overburden to the firm. Then I see a question of, do you need to be using Caseware Working Papers Cloud to use SQM, and how is the application priced? Is it fixed, or does it depend on the number of users? Which is a great question. So what we've done is, so first of all, you don't need Caseware working papers, but you do need Caseware Cloud. So for firms out there that is maybe not a working papers user, if you have your audit methodology somewhere else, you can still purchase Cloud and you can still make use of SQM within your firm. The application is priced per user and it is a bundled option. So we have created bundles for the firms to also facilitate providing you with discount as the number of users go up within the firm. So there is specific bundles, and you would then have to get in touch with the account manager to see where you fit in within that user numbers. Can the completed system of quality management be exported to a PDF? No, it cannot. The system of quality management will be available not in a PDF format, but it is available on SQM, as you saw. So you can have a look, and people will be able to have a look through the system of quality management within the system itself. Okay, so I'm just quickly going through the other items. So I'm getting a question: will the product be customized for Eastern Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, so that it aligns with the ISSB? So ISQM, as it was included in either British English or the American English, is included already in terms of the requirements directly from the ISSB. So it can already be used in regions where the standard is exactly adopted from the ISSB with no changes. It's only when the regulator has made any specific changes onto that. You want to add?
Christian, what I just want to add to that question is that, remember you may have seen, I think it was the gift policy or procedure where we referred to the SICA code and the IRBA code. So the international, when you select the international standard in setting up your system, that response in the library will refer to the ISPA code and to the relevant sections of the ISPA code. So it was just because we had selected the South African standard that we specifically then referred to the South African codes that were relevant. There are some Companies Act things like that that have specifically been modified for South Africa. We also had some modifications for other countries. So again, I actually want to invite you, if you have specific modifications that you need for other regions or specific regulators, then we can include those. So don't be put off by seeing the SICA code. Remember that we set this up for a South African company at the start.
Thanks, Janai. So then if we move on with some of the other questions, how secure is the data in SQM and where is the data kept or hosted? So it depends on the region that you're asking the question from. The app is available globally and it is hosted in different regions and different servers. So on the Caseware Africa website, there is a cloud security policy already in place. You can navigate to that security policy and on the success community, and you can have a look at cloud security in general, where your Caseware Cloud instance would be hosted, and the data is definitely secure. So we use bank-like security. It is audited, and we do have all the certifications that is needed in place. And you can have a list of those certifications on the website as well, and all of the information around the security principles and policies together with the audits and certifications are available on the website. Then the next question, will I be able to edit the system of quality management as a user, or is it reserved for partners only? So remember when I showed the initial staff setup, you would as a firm admin and as a firm also decide who can edit the system of quality management. So if I quickly jump back into the SQM app, we have our design, operate, and operate overview tabs. And if we look at the security, if no security has been allocated, you won't be able to edit anything. If I go into staff and I go into that SQM user, then that user will only have access to the actual actions I have allocated to them. So let's open any staff member, just have a look at the first one, edit them quickly, and you can see that if I go into the apps, this specific user, there we can see they have access to SQM, but to look at the app itself, but they don't have access to any of the advanced roles. So if I then allocated the design role to them, they would see the design tab. If I allocate the operate, they will see operate, and if I allocate overview, they will see overview. So you would go and allocate these roles. These roles can also be allocated on group level. So if you have a group for your partners, a group for your other staff, when you go into the partner group and you say all the partners are involved in designing the manual, you can allocate the design advanced role to a specific group, and they can then all have access to design. But staff should ideally, general staff should not have access to the design or the overview, because you don't want those staff members to see everyone else's tasks, who received gifts, who's got independence declarations around specific firms. That information is not always relevant to them. So you would give all staff access to operate, but then only some staff access to design. So is there a need to develop a SQM manual as a firm, even if signing on to Caseware SQM? After completing the SQM process, can it serve as a manual which can be exported to PDF? So the new standard doesn't require a physical manual as such, like the old traditional ISQC1 standard did. The new standard requires a system of quality management, and that is the purpose of SQM. So if I jump back into SQM and we have a look at operate, that is my SQM, so my system of quality management. This is the actual system. This is the replacement of the manual. So you don't need a manual. You don't need to print this to PDF or have it exported into PDF. This is your system of quality management. So the system is iterative, and it will change as we go along, and you'll be able to see what did the system look like at a specific point in time. When was which version published? Which of the objectives are approved, was not approved, what was a risk or a policy at a specific point in time, and all of that functionality is included in the published SoQM. So when you purchase SQM, you don't need to have a manual, you don't need to have any other documentation outside of SQM, because all of the information for you is included in the published SoQM. So you have your objective, you have the risk, the policy, the procedure, and even the task to which it's linked to. And all of that is included in your system of quality management, and then you can also read those specific items, the actual policy, procedure, or risk. Okay. Can I use SQM without using every other Caseware products? Yes, you can. So SQM is available on Caseware Cloud. We have put together bundles for Cloud and SQM together. So if you're not a Caseware user today, you can already use SQM on Caseware Cloud together for your system of quality management. And I think the next one links into this one. If our network firm are not on Caseware, but using other systems, are they able to access this cloud SQM? So definitely you would be able to sign up for SQM, even if you're not a Caseware user already, and you can get access to SQM as I've showed it today. And then a question, would this apply to body corporates? I'll pass that one on to you, Anna.
Yes, so if you don't perform any of the services that we mentioned earlier, let's say, for example, independent reviews or compilations, but you do, well, you can either do the compilation of financials for the body corporates, or if you do the audits for body corporates, then yes, you will have to comply with ISQM 1 and therefore need a system of quality management, for which SQM would be a solution for you.
Thanks, Jonah. And also the next one, how will SICA be monitoring this?
Right, I'll take that one as well. So SICA may not necessarily want to monitor this. That's the accounting organization, the professional accounting organization in South Africa. But you may well that the audit regulator, and in South Africa that is the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors, or IRBA, would want to monitor this and see that you have complied with ISQM 1. Now, Christian mentioned that we won't any longer have a manual, so you might still actually have a lever arch file somewhere in a drawer or in a bookshelf, or when IRBA comes, you pull that one out. Well, now you will then give that audit regulator access to your system, the SQM app, and they will work through that to see what are your published policy procedures. They can also then do their, let's call it monitoring. They can then go through and see what has been done, what hasn't been done, what declarations were made of gifts, and anything that is required in terms of your policies and procedures will then be monitored on the app itself.
Thanks, Jonah. Then I see there's quite a few questions around pricing. We'll deal with pricing when we get to the end of the presentation. Quite an interesting one, Joanna, for you. So for a very small accounting firm, only doing compilation engagements. So now compilation engagements, as we said, is now part of the requirements.
Yes.
We are concerned that we won't be able to recover cost of licenses and time spent on SQM from our clients. What alternatives are there to comply without spending too much time or money on systems and licenses? We are very concerned that there won't be a cost benefit.
That is an interesting question. Thank you very much. Right, so I understand the comment with regards to the cost, but I think the benefit in this regard is that you have to comply with that standard. So you have to work through that. You have to do a risk assessment for the relevant objectives. Now, I think that's where the first thing is. If you only do compilations, it's quite possible that a number of the objectives won't be applicable to your firm. So you are likely to already have less risks. You are also likely to have less risks because of the client combination that you have. Perhaps the industries won't be as complicated. So I do believe that your compilation of your system or your design of your system will be a lot quicker than, let's say, a medium-sized firm who does the audits of listed entities and a variety of other things. If you really do conclude at the end of the day that this is extremely expensive, perhaps for context, or not achievable, but perhaps not viable, well, the alternative could really be to use Excel and Word documents, or perhaps an Access database. The challenge just there is the management of versions. And how would you know what version is implemented? How would you know what version needs to be complied with? At what point in time did we issue the new, let's say, the change to the training register, or the change to the gift register form that needs to be completed? And so for you to ensure that staff are actually using the correct versions, that staff are doing the stuff they should be doing because they are aware of the requirements, those kind of things become quite tricky. And for me, being quite risk averse, that's where I want to steer away from items that are not, or let's say solutions that are not automated and not tracking these things. Christian mentioned earlier on that every single thing that happens on the system is tracked in the background. So at some point in time, when, let's say, a regulator comes, or when you have to do your evaluation of the system, you will be able to see which procedures were required at what point in time. So let's say, for example, there's a new procedure with regards to the archiving of files that you implement 3 months down the line only. When you then do your evaluation, yes, you will be able to conclude that in January 2023, we were probably not meeting the objective for file assembly. But we then changed the procedure. Yeah, I can see we identified the risk and we went through the whole risk assessment process. We implemented a new response from, let's say, 15th of March 2023. And so therefore, I feel that with that procedure in place, we will probably achieve the objective in the quality in the standard on quality management. So then the next step is, let's see if staff were complying with that. So now I know not to go and try and find an engagement that was completed before the 15th of March, because staff wouldn't have complied with the procedure. It wasn't applicable then. It wasn't from that point in time. So I will then know to only go and monitor compliance from the 15th of March. And so to me, the combination between the automation of things that automatically gets done, the staff will automatically get notification of those automated tasks through the frequency functionality, and on the other hand, the fact that we can monitor dates, versions, have version control, have the access control, all of that, those two really are the value adds in our system, that over and above the fact that a lot of the thinking has already been done for you in terms of identifying potential risks, policies, or the content are probably already somewhere in this system, and you don't have to go and read. Well, I'm hoping you would have at least attended some kind of webinar somewhere along the line, but you may not necessarily have gotten to the point of reading ISQM 1 itself with all the application paragraphs. You may not necessarily have gotten to a point of reading the implementation guidance. And I think there's probably about 10 webinars just by the ISSB itself. So we've worked through all of that stuff for you to give you the content in the libraries. And so from that perspective, I really do believe that there will be a lot of time saved. Yes, remember the standard changes. It changes for all of us. And so there will be an increased effort for everyone in order to comply with these new requirements.
Thank you, UNA. And then the last one before we move on with the rest of the presentation is, does SQM link with Caseware working papers, Audit International, or then Probe? So at this point, we do not yet have integration back into the engagement files, but it's definitely on the roadmap for us to see what information do we have in working papers, and how do we integrate that information into SQM. So if we think about lockdown dates, date of signatures of the audit reports, staff allocated to different files, the no-claw declarations and no-claw going on, maybe even reportable irregularities being reported, how do we feed back that information into SQM and then design policies, procedures, and then tasks, ultimately, and automate tasks around those actions already. So definitely on the roadmap for us to do. In this first version, we are allowing you to design your system, and we wanted to get that out for everyone to start thinking about designing the system. And as the year goes along and we move into next year, we will continue to add features and integrations to SQM. Okay, so just as a recap for everyone to be reminded, SQM has a workflow that consists out of mainly 5 modules, including this, in addition to the setup module. This is our first release that includes design and operate. You will get the operate overview very early in September, and then in December we will launch the monitor and evaluate. In terms of the requirements of the standard, you only have to monitor and evaluate 1 year after implementation, as UNA said. So you'll be able to have those features set in time for you to look at the monitoring and evaluation very early next year. So for those of you that want to participate in the monitor and evaluate sessions, we will be starting with the beta session in November, but we will also send out communication later to that time, and we will release the final version for this year on the 7th of December. Okay, so since the early release preview we had a few weeks ago, we have had, and our team of account managers have been quite busy with sending out order forms and getting those order forms signed. So we've had a significant amount of interest from the market, and our team of account managers is standing by. If you have not yet requested your quote, remember we said it is bundle price per user, so we need to know how many users you have, which category within the bundle you fit, and then we can send out a quote for you. So if you haven't yet at least asked for a quote, then please reach out to the account managers directly, and they will be in contact with you, or leave your details in the chat and we'll get some of the account managers to phone you. And you also have the option to send an email to casewareafrica.info@adaptit.com, request your quote there, and if you've already received a quote from today, we can start accepting those signed orders and start activating the apps already. So please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Your account manager and the support team will be able to assist you, and we can also do a demo for you if you want to have more detailed questions and you want to see a bit more around the app. Okay, thank you very much for attending. I hope you enjoyed the launch, and best of luck with the implementation of your system's quality management and facilitating compliance around quality with regards to ISQM 1.